The rain had turned the forest path into a river of mud and fallen leaves. Elara moved through it alone, her thin jacket already soaked when she heard the voice. Low, strained, desperate. She found him slumped against a fallen oak, his expensive coat torn at the sleeve, blood darkening his temple. He looked wrong for these woods, like a portrait dropped into the wrong frame. When he saw her, panic flashed across his face. "Don't call anyone," he said immediately. Every instinct screamed danger, but something in his eyes, fear layered beneath confusion, kept her from running. She knelt slowly, close enough to see the mud caked on designer shoes, the tremor in his hands. "Can you stand?" she asked quietly. He tried and failed. She helped him anyway. "Welcome to a world where stories breathe. As you settle in, I wonder, where are you watching from tonight? By the glow of the Christmas tree, perhaps? If these tales find a home with you, consider subscribing. It's the most heartfelt gift a storyteller could receive this season. The rain had turned the forest path into a river of mud and fallen leaves. Elara moved through it alone, her thin jacket already soaked, when she heard the voice, low, strained, desperate. She found him slumped against a fallen oak, his expensive coat torn at the sleeve, blood darkening his temple. He looked wrong for these woods, like a portrait dropped into the wrong frame. When he saw her, panic flashed across his face. "Don't call anyone," he said immediately. Every instinct screamed danger, but something in his eyes, fear layered beneath confusion, kept her from running. She knelt slowly, close enough to see the mud caked on designer shoes, the tremor in his hands. "Can you stand?" she asked quietly. He tried and failed. She helped him anyway. At 27, Elara had perfected the art of being unseen. She woke before sunrise to clean rooms that weren't hers, polished floors that reflected lives she would never live, and returned each night to a narrow bed in the staff quarters. The estate where she worked sprawled across manicured grounds, its windows glowing with warmth that never touched her. She moved through marble hallways like a ghost, present but unacknowledged, her hands scrubbing away evidence of other people's existence while her own slowly disappeared. The bus breakdown wasn't part of the routine. She had been heading back from her one afternoon off, groceries clutched in a worn canvas bag, when the engine coughed and died. Rain hammered the roof. The driver announced they'd be stranded for hours. Most passengers called rides or complained loudly into phones. Elara simply stood, tightened her grip on her bag, and stepped into the storm. The forest shortcut was a relic from childhood, before her mother died and the world shrank to work and survival. She hadn't walked it in years, but muscle memory guided her feet onto the narrow trail that cut behind the estate. Trees closed overhead like clasped hands. Wind whispered through branches. Leaves slicked the ground, turning each step treacherous. Halfway through, she heard it. A voice. Male. Strained. Confused. "Hello?" Elara froze, rain streaming down her face. Every warning her mother ever gave her surfaced at once. Don't stop, don't engage, don't make yourself vulnerable. But something in the voice, not threatening, but afraid, pulled her forward. She left the path. The forest floor sucked at her shoes as she pushed through undergrowth, following the sound until she saw him collapsed against the fallen oak. His coat was tailored, expensive, ruined. His shoes were Italian leather caked in mud. Blood traced a dark line from his temple to his jaw. When he looked up, his eyes were sharp despite the confusion clouding them. "Don't call anyone," he said immediately, before she could speak. Elara's heart hammered. She should run. She should ignore this. She should follow every rule that kept women like her safe. Instead, she crouched slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said quietly. "But you're bleeding." He tried to stand and collapsed back against the tree, breath hissing through clenched teeth. "Can you walk at all?" she asked. "I can try." She helped him up, his arm heavy across her shoulders, his weight pressing down like gravity had doubled. He smelled like rain and copper and something else. Fear, maybe, or desperation. They moved slowly, step by agonizing step, the forest pressing in around them. "What happened?" Elara asked, more to fill the silence than expecting truth. "I got turned around," he said. Pause. That's not the full truth. She didn't push. She understood secrets. Her whole life was built on them. The invisibility required to survive in wealthy spaces, the silence expected from people who cleaned up after excess. By the time they reached the maintenance cabin near the estate's edge, Elara's arms shook from exertion. The small structure was meant for tools, not people, but it had a roof and a single light. She guided him to the wooden bench and retrieved the first aid kit from the dusty shelf. "This will sting," she warned, dabbing antiseptic on the wound. He didn't flinch. He watched her instead, eyes tracking her movements like someone memorizing a face they might never see again. "You live around here?" he asked. "I work nearby." "For who?" She shrugged, focusing on the bandage. "People who don't notice me." A faint smile touched his mouth, then vanished as he winced. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Most people wouldn't have stopped." Elara almost laughed. Stopping was all she ever did. It was the world that never stopped for her. She stayed until color returned to his face, until his breathing steadied. When she offered again to call someone, an ambulance, the police, he shook his head firmly. "Not yet." Before she could leave, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a ring. Simple gold, unadorned, warm from being against his body. "In case I don't get the chance to thank you properly," he said, pressing it into her palm. "I can't. Please." The weight of it felt wrong in her hand, too valuable, too significant. But something in his expression, urgent, almost pleading, made her close her fingers around it. That night, Elara walked home through the rain, every muscle aching, confusion settling in her chest like a stone. She placed the ring on her bedside table and stared at it until exhaustion pulled her under. The next morning, everything changed. She turned once before leaving the cabin, compelled by something she couldn't name. He stood in the doorway, illuminated by the single bulb, watching her with the intensity of someone who wouldn't be found again. Then the forest swallowed her, and he disappeared into shadow. Morning arrived with mechanical predictability. Elara woke before dawn, muscles stiff from the previous night's ordeal, and moved through her routine on autopilot. Shower, uniform, hair pinned back. The ring sat on her bedside table, catching early light, but she left it there. Some things were too heavy to carry into daylight. The staff quarters hummed with low conversation as she entered the common area. Coffee brewing, toast burning. Someone had left the television on, volume barely audible beneath the clatter of breakfast preparations. Elara poured coffee, only half listening as the morning news droned through weather and traffic reports. Then the anchor's tone shifted. "Breaking news this morning, Billionaire tech CEO Philip McKee has been reported missing after disappearing from a private retreat. Authorities suspect foul play." The mug stopped halfway to Elara's lips. On screen, a photograph filled the frame. Tailored suit, confident posture, sharp eyes that commanded boardrooms and shaped industries. The face was clean, polished, powerful, Nothing like the bleeding stranger who had leaned against her in the rain, but it was him. Her breath caught. McKee, 37, is the founder and CEO of Vision Tech Industries, with an estimated net worth of $8.3 billion, the anchor continued. He was last seen leaving the Ashford estate yesterday evening. Security footage from the property has been corrupted, and his phone was found destroyed near the forest perimeter. The camera cut to a press conference. A woman in a severe suit stood before microphones, concern etched into professionally practiced features. "We believe Philip was taken against his will," she said, voice trembling just enough. "We're offering a $5 million reward for any information leading to his safe return." Alara's hands shook. Coffee sloshed over the rim. "Jesus," someone muttered beside her. $5 million! Can you imagine? She couldn't. She couldn't imagine any of it. The man on screen, powerful, controlled, worth billions, had nothing to do with the confused, frightened person who'd whispered, "That's not the full truth," in the darkness. Except they were the same person. The news cycled through images. Philip at tech conferences, Philip shaking hands with politicians, Philip standing before massive screens displaying innovations that changed how the world connected. Each photograph showed someone who commanded attention, who shaped reality with capital and influence. Not someone who ran into the woods. "Authorities are investigating all possibilities, including kidnapping and corporate espionage," the anchor said. "Anyone with information is urged to contact." Alara walked away before the number appeared. Her shift started in 10 minutes. Floors needed cleaning. Marble needed polishing. The world required her invisibility. But her mind wouldn't quiet. Taken against his will. No. She'd seen his eyes. Fear, yes. Confusion, certainly. But not the terror of someone stolen. Something else entirely, the desperation of someone choosing the forest over whatever waited behind. The day stretched endlessly. She moved through hallways while televisions whispered the same lies in every room. Guests gathered in clusters, speculating with the casual fascination of people watching tragedy from safe distance. Security doubled at every entrance. Management circulated with tight expressions and tighter instructions. "Be alert. Report anything unusual. Mr. McKee is a valued client of this estate." Alara scrubbed floors and said nothing. By evening, tension had transformed the estate into something new. Watchful, suspicious, power protecting itself against threat. She finished her shift exhausted, desperate for the silence of her room. Instead, she found a black SUV parked at the staff gate. Philip stood beside it. He looked different, clean. Bandage replaced with a smaller, neater one. Clothes expensive but understated. Still, when his eyes found hers across the parking area, something in his expression softened into recognition. Alara's stomach dropped. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly when she reached him, aware of cameras, of eyes, of the danger gathering like storm clouds. "They'll find me anywhere," he replied. "I needed to see you." She led him away from cameras, through the garden to the old greenhouse management had abandoned years ago. Glass panels were clouded with age, plants long dead, but it offered privacy. "They're saying you were kidnapped," Alara said, turning to face him. "Your company, your board, the news." "I know. Why are they lying?" Philip exhaled slowly, the sound carrying weight she couldn't measure. "Because the truth would ruin them." He told her everything. The retreat hadn't been rest. It had been theater, a carefully staged intervention disguised as wellness. Board members, lawyers, the woman from the press conference, Victoria Dixon, VP of Operations and Architect of Control. They'd presented him with documents. A merger he hadn't approved. A marriage arrangement to the daughter of their largest investor. Contracts that would dilute his voting power while maintaining his public image as visionary leader. They want the brand, Philip said quietly. The face, the name, not the person. When he'd refused, when he'd said no, actually said the word aloud for the first time in years, the threats began. Declare him mentally unstable, remove him as CEO, erase him from the company he'd built. So he ran. Not smart, not planned, just desperate. I walked into the forest because it was the only door they hadn't locked, he said. Elara thought of the ring on her bedside table, of the reward climbing on screens across the country. You need to leave, she said, before this destroys both of us. Philip's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, expression darkening. The reward just doubled, he said quietly. $10 million. The number hung between them like a guillotine blade. Elara understood immediately. 10 million wasn't generosity. It was weaponized desperation. It transformed every person who'd seen her near the woods into a potential threat, into someone with motivation to remember, to speculate, to sell information. They're not looking for you, she said slowly. They're making sure nobody hides you. Philip met her eyes. And anyone who helped me becomes a liability worth $10 million to eliminate. The media descended like locusts. By morning, satellite vans lined the estate's perimeter. Reporters shouted questions at anyone who emerged. Helicopters circled overhead, cameras hungry for angles. The reward had transformed Philip McKee from missing person to national obsession, and the estate, last known location, became ground zero. Elara watched from a third-floor window as investigators in dark suits moved through the grounds, examining the forest edge where Philip had last been seen. They walked the trails with dogs. They photographed tire tracks. They treated the woods like a crime scene, which meant they were treating Philip like a victim. She knew better. All staff to the conference room. Immediately. The announcement crackled through the intercom, pulling Elara from the window. Her stomach knotted as she joined the stream of employees filing downstairs. Housekeepers, groundskeepers, kitchen workers, all wearing the same expression of nervous confusion. The conference room had been transformed into an interrogation space. Investigators flanked the doors. Management sat at the head table, expressions grim. A woman in a charcoal suit stood at the front, FBI credentials hanging from her neck. I'm Special Agent Morrison, she began without preamble. Philip McKee's disappearance is being treated as a potential abduction. That means everyone who was on property that night is a witness. We'll be conducting individual interviews starting immediately. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. If you saw anything unusual, anyone unfamiliar, vehicles that didn't belong, suspicious behavior, you have an obligation to report it. There's a $10 million reward for information leading to his recovery. 10 million. The number landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of possibility through the room. Elara felt the shift. Colleagues calculating, weighing loyalty against opportunity, measuring what that money could buy, what it could change, what it would cost. The interviews began after lunch. One by one, staff disappeared into private rooms and emerged pale, shaken. The questions were pointed. Where were you? What did you see? Do you know the forest trails? Have you noticed anything suspicious? Elara's turn came at 4 o'clock. Her supervisor, Margaret, sat beside Agent Morrison, expression unreadable. The room felt smaller than it should, air thick with suspicion. Elara Dixon, Morrison read from a file. You've worked here for 3 years. Live in staff housing. Your shift ended at 6 p.m. the night Mr. McKee disappeared. Yes. But you didn't return until after 9. Elara's pulse quickened. The bus broke down. I walked. Through the forest? Silence stretched. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You walk those woods, don't you?" her supervisor said quietly. "I've seen you take that path before." The question felt like a trap closing. "Sometimes," Elara admitted. "It's faster." "Did you see anyone that night?" Morrison asked. The lie formed easily. Too easily. "No." Morrison studied her for a long moment, then made a note. "If you remember anything at all, you need to tell us immediately. Mr. McKee's life could depend on it." Elara nodded, throat tight, and escaped before the truth could surface. The whispers started that evening. She heard them in passing, hushed conversations that stopped when she approached, eyes that followed her through hallways. Staff who'd been friendly now kept distance, as if proximity to her carried risk. Someone had noticed something. Someone always did. The note appeared in her locker the next morning. Plain paper, block letters, no signature. "We know you know something." Elara's hands trembled as she crumpled it, shoving it deep into her pocket. Fear crystallized into certainty. She was being watched, suspected, isolated. The same invisibility that had protected her for years now made her vulnerable. No powerful family to defend her. No connections to shield her. Just a maid who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or the right place, depending on perspective. The ring burned in her pocket where she'd finally started carrying it, too afraid to leave it in her room. $10 million for information. How much for physical evidence? For proof she'd seen him, helped him, hidden the truth. That night, Philip found her in the greenhouse again. He looked worse, exhausted, hunted, guilt etched into every line of his face. "They questioned you," he said. Not a question. "Everyone." "Elara, they left a note in my locker," she interrupted, pulling out the crumpled paper. "Someone knows I was in the woods, or suspects. Doesn't matter which." Philip took the note, jaw tightening as he read. "This is my fault." "It's theirs," Elara corrected, surprised by the steel in her voice. "The people lying. The people weaponizing your disappearance. They're circling you because of my silence." Philip looked at her directly, something shifting in his expression, resolve hardening beneath the guilt. "I won't let them destroy you to protect me." "What are you going to do?" "Take my story back." Elara shook her head. "They'll spin it. They'll make you look unstable, exactly like they threatened." "Maybe. But they can't make you look guilty if I tell the truth." He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that she felt the weight of his presence. "You saved my life. I won't repay that by letting them turn your kindness into a crime." "The reward is bait to make people hunt instead of help." Philip's voice dropped. "You chose to help when everyone else would have walked past. That means something. It means everything." Elara thought of the life 10 million could buy. Education, security, freedom from scrubbing other people's floors. Then she thought of what it would cost, becoming the person who sold someone's desperation for profit. "When?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow, before they have time to tighten the net around you." The greenhouse fell silent except for rain beginning to tap against clouded glass. "They'll come after you," Elara said. "Let them." Philip's expression hardened into something she hadn't seen before. Not the frightened man from the woods, but someone who'd remembered what power felt like when it served truth instead of control. "I'm done running." The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the estate's grand ballroom, a room Elara had cleaned 100 times, but never entered through the front doors. She watched from the service entrance as reporters filled seats, cameras positioned like weapons, the air electric with anticipation. Victoria Dixon stood at the podium, flanked by board members whose concern looked professionally polished. Behind them, a massive screen displayed Philip's photograph, the controlled corporate version of him that bore little resemblance to the man Elara had found bleeding in the woods. "Thank you for coming," Victoria began, voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Today marks 72 hours since Philip McKee disappeared. Every moment that passes decreases our hope of—" The ballroom doors opened. Philip walked in. The room exploded. Cameras swiveled. Reporters surged forward. Victoria's face drained of color, shock cracking through her professional mask. Board members stood frozen, scripts abandoned, as Philip moved through the chaos with quiet certainty. He looked different than he had in the greenhouse. Clean-shaven, wearing a simple suit. The bandage removed to reveal a healing cut, but his eyes carried the same intensity Elara had seen that first night, fear replaced with something harder. Purpose. "I am not missing," Philip said, reaching the podium. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "And I was not kidnapped." The room fell silent. Victoria tried to intervene. "Philip, you're clearly traumatized. We should—" "Step aside, Victoria." The command was quiet, but absolute. Victoria hesitated, then moved, her carefully constructed narrative collapsing in real time. Philip faced the cameras directly. "I left," he said clearly. 3 nights ago, I walked away from this estate, from this company, from the people who claimed to act in my best interest. I left because the life built around my name no longer belonged to me." Questions erupted. Philip didn't flinch. "The retreat was not for wellness. It was an ultimatum. My board presented me with documents. A merger I hadn't approved. A marriage arrangement I never consented to. Contracts designed to strip my decision-making power while maintaining my public image. When I refused to sign, they threatened to declare me mentally unstable and remove me as CEO. A reporter shouted, "Are you saying your own company tried to control you?" "I'm saying they succeeded for years, and when I finally said no, they couldn't accept it." Behind him, board members exchanged panicked glances. Victoria's hand moved toward her phone. Philip continued, relentless. "So I ran, not smart, not planned, just desperate. I walked into the forest because it was the only door they hadn't locked." He paused, letting the weight settle. The kidnapping story, the foul play narrative, the $10 million reward, all of it was designed to force me back into their control, to make my autonomy look like a crime. "Mr. McKee," another reporter called out, "how did you survive 3 days alone?" "I didn't." The room stilled. Someone found me. A woman who had no reason to help, who risked everything by choosing compassion over self-preservation. Philip's gaze swept across the crowd, landing briefly on the service entrance, where Elara stood hidden in shadow. She cleaned my wounds. She asked no questions. She expected nothing in return. And when this circus began, when the reward turned her kindness into suspicion, she stayed silent to protect me. Victoria stepped forward. "Philip, you're not thinking clearly." "Her name is Elara Dixon," Philip continued, ignoring the interruption. "She works as a housekeeper at this estate. For 3 years, she's been invisible to the people who profit from her labor. And when my board turned my disappearance into a manhunt, she became a suspect. People who should have protected her instead interrogated her, threatened her, left anonymous notes accusing her of crimes she didn't commit." The cameras turned, searching the crowd. Elara pressed back against the wall, heart hammering. "I won't allow it," Philip said, voice hardening. "Elara Dixon is not a suspect. She is not a conspirator. She is the reason I'm standing here alive, and I refuse to let her name be erased or twisted by people trying to control a narrative that was never theirs to tell." The questions came faster now, aggressive, hungry. Are you resigning as CEO? Will you press charges against the board? What happens to Vision Tech now? Philip raised a hand, silence falling gradually. What happens next is truth. The board will answer for attempting to control me through coercion and false narratives. Vision Tech will either evolve into a company that values autonomy over profit, or I'll build something new. But I will not be owned. Not by wealth, not by contracts, not by people who mistake my silence for consent. He stepped back from the podium. And to anyone who helped hunt me, who saw $10 million and forgot what kindness looks like, Elara Dixon showed me what it means to be human when being powerful had made me forget. I won't forget that. I won't let you forget it either. The press conference dissolved into chaos. Reporters shouted. Board members fled. Victoria stood frozen at the podium, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. Elara slipped away before the cameras could find her. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Vision Tech's stock plummeted. Board members resigned within hours. Victoria Dixon released a statement citing miscommunication before disappearing from public view. Media outlets that had breathlessly reported the kidnapping now scrambled to reframe, backpedaling through careful language that avoided accountability. But Elara's name never appeared in the headlines. By design, Philip had been precise, defending her without exposing her, clearing her name without making her a story. The investigators who'd questioned her received direct communication from Philip's personal legal team. The note leaver stayed anonymous and silent. Staff who'd whispered and distanced themselves now avoided her eyes for different reasons. Shame, maybe, or recognition of what they'd been willing to believe. Elara quit 3 days later. The letter arrived that same evening, slipped under her door. No logo, no legal language, just simple words in handwriting she recognized from the greenhouse. You reminded me what it felt like to be human. I won't forget that. Inside was a deed to a small apartment across town, paid in full, not charity, not rescue, just acknowledgement. One person seeing another and saying, you matter. Elara walked the forest path one final time before leaving. The trees looked different in afternoon light, less threatening, more familiar. She moved slowly, remembering that night. The rain, the fear, the choice to stop when walking past would have been easier. The world had tried to turn her kindness into a weapon. It failed. She reached the clearing where she'd found him, where blood had darkened mud and desperation had looked like expensive shoes, ruined by running. Nothing remained now except leaves and shadow and the quiet knowledge that sometimes being invisible meant people forgot you could see them too. Elara smiled. Then she walked forward, not back, choosing the path ahead because for the first time in years, it felt like hers to choose. Thank you for sharing this story with me. As the Christmas lights twinkle, remember, your subscription isn't just a click. It's a bell that rings out, telling me to keep writing for you. Don't let the magic end here. Subscribe and let's journey into the new year together.